What up, everybody? Sven Diesel here. Going to be tying up a Rainbow Warrior. This is a pattern by a competition angler, Lance Egans. We're going to be loading up a stealth hook. This is a prototype hook right now. It's a competition barbless. I got it in the vise with a nice gritty tungsten bead on there. This is basically going to be exactly how Lance ties it. I'm just doing a wire body instead of using the tinsel, because in the competition world, I guess you can't use touching body wraps such as what's on a copper john, or you can only use wire to accent ribbing. And so I gonna tie in some pheasant tail just as he does. I'm going to take about 4 to 5 fibers and just pull them back and go ahead and tie them in by making sure my tips are aligned. Going to be a little bit careful on that. And I'm just going to lay it on the top of the shank of the hook, kind of in about where I want them, and I'll do a couple wraps, and then I will check to see how it looks, making sure that fibers stay on top. And that's a little too long, so I'll pull it. And now, holding that the tail fibers, I'm just keeping it up on top, using some wraps, kind of putting a little bit of tension and making sure it's right where I want it. If it's too long or too short, you can always undo your wraps at this point, and that's where I like it. And I'll go ahead and trim that out. And I've got a little bit of a hump there, and I'm using Semperfli's nano silk, and this lays really flat. This is 18-aught, I believe. And so I'm going to have to use some wraps to build up a little bit of bulk on the body, because what we're going to be doing for the body, instead of wrapping with tinsel, we're going to be actually using wire weave. And so I've selected my, it's not really a weave, I'd say it's more of a twist, but I got 3 colors here. This is all 0.1 millimeter wire. This is pretty thin stuff. I don't know how it compares to extra small, but I think it's relatively, maybe even a little smaller. But I've got about 3.5 inches here. I'm going to go ahead and just tie it in, and kind of shove my tips up in the bead there. And I got a straggler. Always make sure these wires are aligned. That helps. You can always use the bead as a bump stop, and there we go. Let's get up. This blue one just isn't wanting to cooperate with me, but we'll get it tied in. And I kind of have my wire on the top of the shank, and then as I work my way back, I kind of maybe tie it in more on the opposing side. That way, as I start my first wrap, it is good to go, just up and over. But I'll secure that wire in with some nice tight wraps, ending with my thread up behind the bead. And now comes the wire twist. I've got this hackle plier here that's pretty strong. Anything will do, alligator clips or whatever you want. You can even just do it by hand, but by hand I didn't find got it as tight as I wanted. So I'll just hold those 3 fibers so it's tight, being careful not to break my wire out by moving this too much around. And you can see I just clamped it so they're all in there good. And I've got this little roto tool hook that I'm just going to hook into the end of my hackle plier there, and I'll just go ahead and give her some twists, and then making sure not to, there, it didn't want to stay in. But you want to make sure you're not twisting it too tight, because you could break it out, and then at this point it's not. That looks pretty good. I'm going to do a few more wraps. I found that as I twist this tighter and tighter and tighter, usually it breaks at the hackle plier, where you're gripping onto it first. I haven't had too many break where at my tie-in point yet. And then as soon as you're ready to go, just go ahead and start wrapping that body with touching wraps. And it's pretty interesting to see how by twisting this wire, it actually kind of forms a pattern. If you look at it at the real close up, I guess macro level, we're a little far out, so you could see these wraps today. and the hackle plier and twisting it, but the wire gets really cool. I'm playing around with a few other collar combinations at this point. Basically, having a little bit of fun with wire and making that body out of wire, making it really durable. But we'll tie that off once we get the body wrapped, and from this point on, it's basically Rainbow Warrior time. Lance Egans, this is a pattern is fished quite a bit out here. He says it doesn't match any sort of hatch, but it catches fish, and I have fished it and it catches fish, and so I believe him. But I'm going to tie in a little bit of tinsel at this point. I like the personally, I think this is medium, and I'll just kind of grab it on the side and then make sure as I tie it in that it's basically going straight down the shank of the hook. And this doesn't need to be too clean in here because we're going to cover it with some I use Rainbow scud dub, and I'm just going to grab a little bit of a clump out of my about like that. And this stuff has some pretty cool UV properties. We'll for sure get out the light a little bit, but I'm just going to take about half that and dub it on, and I'm going to just kind of zigzag around this little thorax, if you would, or collar, and that way I've got some dubbing that's really secure in there. I use pretty good tight wraps, and then I'll go ahead and twist it another little clump on, little noodle, and this time I'll just work my way, so covering any gaps, creating a nice little hump, ending my thread behind the bead, pulling the tinsel over, and go ahead and tie it off with a wrap over the top, and I'll do a couple wraps in front of it, and then we'll go ahead and cut it out. Now when he ties this up, he likes a red hot spot, and so I'm going to grab a red Sharpie. Once I get a few more wraps in here, I kind of want to build it up, because when if you start with the red, I have to build it up and color more and more of the red. So this way I just color a small section, go ahead and do a whip finish with a nice bunch of turns, kind of building that hot spot up to where I like it, and we'll tie it out, and that's good. So let's go ahead and cut our thread out, and not necessary, but I'm going to put a little bit of this no tack resin just over the top as kind of a cement for the thread, and also to kind of protect that tinsel, and hold a little bit of that dubbing in. But I'm just going to put a little drop there, kind of smooth it around. Got a little too much. There we go. And we'll go ahead and give that a cure with the light. Look away at this point for about 10 seconds. And I'm sure you're fine looking at it through a computer, but yep, we'll just go ahead and let that cure a little bit, and then I'm going to grab my got a little pick tool here. I'm going to pick out some of this dubbing to make it a little bit buggier. Pick it out to that side. I'm going to switch it. You're probably not going to be able to see this, but basically doing what I did to the other side, just kind of picking out a little bit to the side, and that looks pretty good. So here we go. This is a Rainbow Warrior just tied with a wire body. I used 3 wires. Looks really cool. This dubbing's awesome. Check it out. Under UV, got some pretty bugginess going on, and the original pattern catches fish. This was just me playing around, having fun, so good luck.